Here we are, sitting here when we should be out and about. Obviously, at the moment, we can't go out and about due to this pandemic that's sweeping the world. Now, one of the big questions has to be, when can we go back out and about again, and what will it look like? At the moment, we are in the middle of a government lockdown. You're only allowed to leave your house for essentials, for exercise, or indeed, if you're a key worker, to go to work. Now, most of us that are watching this channel, I'd like to think of theme park enthusiasts, fun fair enthusiasts, adventure enthusiasts. Join the adventure. That includes zoos, that includes farms, which are all currently closed. There is nowhere to go. So what is it going to take for theme parks to reopen? Now, we have a government review coming up in approximately 10 days' time. In that review, it is expected that there will be an ease on some of the restrictions. Will this include any of the attractions? What do you think? What do you think? Now, in this video, we're going to have a look at kind of what might be needed, what our suggestions are and what our thoughts are on it, and indeed what we think might help or might not help. Now, there's no doubt about at the moment, one of the key buzz phrases is social distancing, 6 feet, 2 meters away from people around you, whether that be at your supermarket, whether that be out in the street, whether that be exercising, or indeed if you go to a theme park. Now, first things first, we will share our adventure from the last opening day of Chessington World of Adventures, because Chessington World of Adventures and Legoland to some extent the week before were putting social distancing in place. And of course, this was before any announcement was made. This was before it was kind of, law to do so. So, some things were put in kind of half-heartedly and some things were put in were a really good idea. That included markers on the floor of where to stand in certain queue lines. Dragon had that at at Legoland, and a couple of other rides had it as well. That also included loading every other train, every other car of the train at Vampire. So you'd kind of be row 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 and 11, and then the other ones would stay empty to keep the distance. So where are we on this? Where are we on this? How's it going to work? Could it work? And how long are we going to be locked down from the theme parks for? So what do we think would help? What do we think would help? Well, at the moment, it's very difficult to tell. We get mixed information about wearing masks and we get mixed information about temperature check-in. So what could the parks be doing? Well, they could issue masks to people. Apart from the high cost in this, is it actually going to help? Well, it's only going to help if someone has the disease in question, and if they do, they've got to have some responsibility on not to go to the theme park in the first place. Temperature check-in is all very good, but obviously temperature check-in can be controlled. If you're ill, temperature check-in can be controlled to bring your temperature down. So even if you have got it, it may not be relevant at the time of the temperature check. And of course, this could be spread by, someone not having that symptom at all. So I can't see the benefit of having temperature checks going into theme parks. Some things I think would reassure people. I don't think the members of the public can necessarily be expected to wear masks out and about around theme parks all day long. I don't think it's going to be necessarily beneficial either, because the idea of the mask is that they kind of protect other people from you giving it to other people rather than necessarily getting it from other people. So I can't see the benefit in that. And obviously, if you're taking your children to theme parks, there is no way they're going to wear those for 6 to 8 hours a day. On the other hand, I think that team members could well be wearing masks. Now, we're not saying they've got it, but it's certainly going to make people feel better when they're sitting on the ride, when they're queuing and when they come in contact with team members for that to happen. On top of that, one of the biggest areas is going to be restraint checking and indeed restraint cleaning. And does it help? Does it help clean them after every time? We go back to the VR of Galactica. Obviously, when Galactica opened, it was heavily advertised that they would be sanitized before each ride. And it added massive time to the queue line. And of course, that was a time when everyone was visiting and it was a brand new attraction. However, by the end, to be honest, they weren't doing that. They weren't doing that at all. They weren't being sanitized certainly as thoroughly as what they were when the ride opened. And you've got to ask yourself this now. I mean, whilst I know I touch my face and nose and everything whilst I make videos, it's a natural reaction. The training is that we can't do that. The training is if the restraint isn't cleaned every single time, it poses no extra threat to if you touch the banister on the way out that isn't being cleaned daily and it has a potential virus on it. As long as you're not touching your face, you can't catch it. Of course, it can be airborne from people sneezing, coughing, and again, people like this, you've got to be asking yourselves, they've got to have some responsibility not to go to the park. Of course, when you're outdoors, it is significantly reduced, the chances of getting it from such a wide angle distance, but certainly for indoor rides could be very, very difficult. So again, we look at potential reduced capacity of the theme parks. Now, this has been debated across the world, in honesty, about reducing the amount of people in the theme park. Now, there are two ways of looking at this. Obviously, reducing the amount of people will have less people in the park. There's no doubt about it. And there are ways to manage this. Various people saying annual pass holders shouldn't be able to go. It should only be for certain people that have pre-booked or anything like that. I don't think is necessarily the case. The parks could manage this if they wanted to. Annual passes, I believe, would have to make a payment online, would have to secure with maybe a £2.50, not too excessive, payment online to say, yes, I am coming on such a day, rather than being able to rock up at the park. Along with online tickets and along with pre-booked tickets that the park had confirmed that people were still coming, these then help limit the amount of people in the park. If you've got annual pass holders rocking up, and just expecting to get in, you can't control the amount of people in the park. Now, however sad it sounds, and I know people will say, well, if I'm an annual pass holder, I should be able to rock up the park. I think everyone's got to be in a position now where they understand that these are very, very different times at the moment, and it's got to work slightly differently. Whether or not there's an extra perk for annual pass holders that do come on the day and pay a little bit extra, whether there's reduced the monthly rate, whether there's an extension to the ones you've already bought, it would be something that certain theme parks would need to kind of establish. But in terms of them saying, yeah, we're going to run at 50% capacity, this is how we're going to do it, I think it would work. I do think it would work. And seeing quiet days at Legoland and Chessington, you could do it. You could do it. But of course, you've also got to look at the fact that how many people are actually going to go to the theme park. We've read a lot of discussion, a lot of views on this from, again, forums, videos across the world. And there are a lot of people saying, look, until it's safe, I'm not going. I'm not going to the theme park. And of course, we look at annual pass holders, but most annual pass holders that visit their local park do so because they're local. I have an annual pass for Merlin, includes Alton Towers, but I only go to Alton Towers 2 or 3 times a year because of the distance it is away. But I'll go to my local park quite a lot because it's local. Realistically, whilst all these restrictions are in place, and they're probably likely to be fairly heavy restrictions, am I likely to drive 6 or 7 hours to go to a theme park, stay over, potential hotels, having to eat out and things like that? And I think the answer is no. I genuinely think the answer is no to that. And again, it might put us off going to places like Blackpool from where we're on the south coast, and it might put people off in Blackpool coming down to Thorpe Park or places like that. So there's two ways of looking at this. Not everyone is going to visit a theme park once it reopens straight away. Social distancing inside the theme park, I actually believe can work really well. Now, it does need a little bit of common sense, and I know people don't always have common sense, but it does need a little bit of common sense. When we were at Chessington and Legoland, to be honest, we didn't have that many problems. Bear in mind there were no restrictions in place and things were only suggested. We hadn't kind of developed where we are now. People were generally quite well on it. Of course, there's going to be about 10% of people that aren't, but hopefully those people now are going to be much better given that we've had a lockdown situation. The biggest problem the theme parks had, and we've said it before on social media and indeed on our live chats, is the queuing outside to get in. Theme parks open at 10, people start arriving from 9, you can't have a mass queue outside. And it did seem really counterproductive at Legoland and Chessington to have social distancing measures inside, fully advertised on our website, and then have 5 to 1,000 people standing outside like sardines waiting to get in. These theme parks have got to be in a position where staff need to arrive from 9 o'clock. At the end of the day, they just don't open car parks until 9, maybe 9:15. And then the parks have got to be open to prepare to just let people in. It doesn't matter if rides are being tested, they all have their own close-off points. Just let people in, roam the park and spread out the people as soon as possible. And it's really disappointing at Legoland because obviously Legoland usually open Miniland first anyway, so you're able to do that. There should be no priority for hotel guests that are staying in a hotel should the hotel be open, which is kind of what scales things back. If they do want to open rides for hotel guests, so be it. They can have a little wristband to get on them at a certain time, just requires a staff member there to do it. Queue lines, again, I don't think are a problem. They can be marked out, they can be taped out, they can be painted on like they were at Legoland. It will work. It will work as long as people stick to it. Inside, attractions are going to be very, very difficult. Now, it was very odd to see that things like play areas were closed, which I fully understand. Children don't tend to understand the social distancing at certain ages. And rides like Toon Blaster were open, indeed loading it was one family per car, but again, that could be compromised and would probably have to be kind of stretched out a little bit as well. And the same would have to be argued for Ninjago and things like that. The parks would really, really have to commit to being able to keep social distancing in the theme park, in the queues, particularly for dark rides, indoor attractions, in order for it to work. And it is kind of down to the park to manage, whilst it is up to the individual to stay safe once they're inside, once they've been given guidelines. The guidelines do need to be put in place. We could look at food, ordering, restaurants. Obviously, restaurants were opening before the lockdown, and they were opening with increased gaps between tables. And again, I can't see why that wouldn't work. Quite a lot of theme parks have outdoor seating. We are going into a period, hopefully, of warm weather. And again, I think it could be managed. It could be managed that people can kind of spread out and eat and enjoy kind of meals with the family as well. Even if they only do a takeaway and you have to go outside to a grassy area, which most theme parks have, and kind of separate, would be a great idea. That then leads on to the fact that the park should be contactless only, 100% cash-free contactless only. And there's no real reason for it now, with the limit kind of being £45, and you can split transactions if you're in restaurants. £45, and you're already pre-booking your ticket online, no on-the-day purchases whatsoever. You're only looking kind of snacks in the park, drinks and things like that. And it would help, obviously, if all the vending machines are working as well when you go to the theme parks. That said, there can't be meet and greets. There's quite a few great stage shows which could still go ahead, 100% still go ahead. Again, I'll go back to Chesington because it's one I visited. Every other bench was kind of segregated off to keep the 6 feet distance. Would work very, very well, but meet and greets in between, you obviously can't be doing. You won't be able to be doing it for the moment. And I think, it's very, very difficult. It's going to be very, very difficult between smaller and bigger theme parks. Smaller parks, local parks, for instance, to get a couple of hundred visitors at a time will probably be okay, opening and maintaining social distances. For the larger theme parks, your Legolands, Alton Towers, places like that, it might be slightly more difficult without a little bit more effort. Restraint checking 100% comes in as the hardest part of the job, where you're going to have to get close and interact with the person. You can't just rely on them to do their own restraint up. However, there is always going to be an element. There's always an element that you can go to a theme park and someone's got something that you could catch, whether it be something simple as a common cold, whether it be something a bit more serious. It's very, very difficult. So there has got to be an element around it as well, that there is going to be a risk factor. And I think, if you can't kind of see yourself in any of those situations, it's quite simple. You're going to have to stay at home and not visit these places. Zoos and farms, again, we don't see much of an issue with. There's no queues generally. It's quite a wide open space, and they desperately, desperately need our support, probably more than what the theme parks do, with animals to feed and things to run as well. It's desperately, desperately need to open and get our support, and I think they could do that really, really safely. So what suggestions will we have? As we've said, I'm not sure masking up, gloving up and everything like that is going to be particularly productive when you're out and about. You see some people with masks. I work in a shop. I don't wear a mask. We don't wear gloves because it lives on your gloves longer than what it lives on your hands. And it's a now new routine of washing or sanitizing, depending which one's easier. And I think the same has to be at the theme parks as well. People do have to be responsible for their own hygiene, but at the same time, the theme parks can do a little bit extra. Then you can get mobile wash stations, which I think should be installed on rides, quite simply on rides. Because you should only sanitize 10 times before washing your hands, which would be very, very difficult for a ride attendant. And if things are sterilized at the beginning of the day, maybe hourly restraints and things, and the workers are hand washing every single time, and then it's going to be happy days. Arguably there is time for them to wash their hands between trains coming in, or indeed ride swap overs, in order to keep themselves clean. Whilst rides are in motion, they can be washing their hands whilst someone else is watching it, and they take turns. It might mean they need more staff. Some staff, some rides only run with one member of staff. Some of the flat rides, it wouldn't be able to happen. Some of the roller coasters have kind of someone going up and down with no one else. They would need a couple of extra staff in there. But arguably, if some of the other rides are closed, some of the dark rides are closed, some of the play areas are closed, this is where parks have to kind of decide what they could be doing. More wash stations around as well for the members of the public would be particularly handy. Possibly not sanitizer, but just soap. Soap is probably easier to get hold of than what sanitizer is at the moment, and water, indeed rerouting water, is probably easier than someone stealing all the sanitizer. So I think that would be the way forward. It really would be the way forward. Alternate rows is a great idea on the roller coasters. Have your own boat to yourself on a water ride, have your own kind of compartment to yourself on a dark ride. It's going to work really, really well. Again, throughputs will be hit, but if the park is at 50% capacity, and on top of that, people might not be visiting, you've kind of got to be looking. You've got to kind of be looking at, every day will be an off-peak day, I think will be the way we're looking at it. And there will still be a load of people that go to these places. There'll be a load of teenagers that will flock to Fort Park, 100% flock to Fort Park. There will be a lot of families that will go to Chesington. There will be a lot of groups that go to Legoland, because it's just the way it is. So I don't think there'd be in a case where they'd have no visitors. But I don't necessarily think there'd be in a case where they would oversell the 50% limit mark, even on a weekend, which arguably, every day could be a weekend, depending on whether the schools go back. And I think if the schools do go back, there won't be school trips out to the theme parks this year. I think, the heavy, well, it's definitely not going to be May, but heavy June, early July time simply won't happen if the schools go back. There's no way schools will risk taking people out. But what do you think? What do you think about this? It's quite, it's not quite, it's a massively serious situation that we're in at the moment. And it's quite serious for some of these parks. We hear things that the parks aren't going to open again this year. We hear things, that parks are trying to open. Alton Towers have a primary date. I think Merlin do it off the 1st of June, which I'm a little bit surprised actually that they've done it potentially that late. Given that I think other places will start opening in 2 weeks' time. But it's interesting after half term that they would do that. On top of that, you've got fun fairs. And arguably fun fairs are in the best situation yet of travelling to a location, having quite low crowds, making some money and being able to distance people apart. Again, with the same routines that we've said around mask sanitising, and maybe they wouldn't be able to have so many wash basins and things like that. That's probably not quite as easy to do by any means. However, they are in a situation where people aren't going to be there as long, and they could definitely make some money as long as they don't allow groups to hang around necessarily. So I think there are ways and means of going about this, and I do believe the theme parks will be open in one way or another by the middle of June. That's going to be my estimation, unless we have another spike middle of June. And it's very interesting to see, let us know who will visit when they reopen, what precautions will you be taking, and indeed what would you like to see the parks do? What would you like to see them put in place before you feel it's safe to visit? Or is it simply a case of you're not going to visit until everything is sorted and we have a vaccine and there's no way you're going to catch it? Let us know in the comments below. We're really interested, obviously. This is a massive situation that affects the whole community. So we want to know your thoughts. Leave them below. Thanks for joining us today. Hopefully we'll see you out on the road soon.